Hello again, everyone. Welcome to the Cipher Brief Virtual Studio. I'm Tom Nagorski for a conversation today about an enormous and enormously important subject, and that is nuclear proliferation. It's not that long ago, for some of us anyway, in the aftermath of the Cold War, that conversations about this subject tended to look at least at a somewhat positive aspect of it, meaning that arsenals were shrinking, or at least one could hope that they might be, around the world. Now, for a range of reasons that we'll talk about with our guest today, things are going in the other direction, and not always with the usual suspects, as it were. There are adversaries of the United States, but also some longtime allies that are considering either boosting arsenals or creating a nuclear capability where they never had one before. We're joined today by Ambassador Joseph Detrani. It's great to see you, Ambassador, a Cipher Brief expert. Long resume in intelligence and diplomacy. And I'm going to mention one item on that resume, Ambassador, which we don't normally, but it's relevant today. He was a former director of the National Counterproliferation Center at the ODNI. And he recently wrote a piece that we published here at the Cipher Brief under the heading Nuclear Proliferation in a Dangerous Moment, which pretty much said it all. And if we could start, Ambassador, in a perhaps unexpected place for some, and it's a place you know very well, which is East Asia, but not North Korea, not China, but Japan and South Korea, where I don't know how to characterize it. Is it rumblings or more than that about potentially pursuing nuclear programs? What is happening there and why?
Well, I think, thank you, Tom, for having me on. No, I think in South Korea, it's pretty obvious. The majority of the people in South Korea believe South Korea needs a nuclear weapon as a deterrent to North Korea. It's as simple as that.
Just to stop for 1 second, because the North Koreans and their nuclear capability have been there for a long time.
Yes.
So you're right. It's totally simple and it makes sense. It's a common sense thing. But why now?
Okay, why now, Tom? One, we're not talking to North Korea. Mm-hmm. Two, North Korea now has memorialized in its constitution what South Korea and the U.S. are the enemies. Three, North Korea now is aligned with the Russian Federation and sending troops in there. Four, they're getting ballistic missile assistance, nuclear assistance, satellite assistance from the Russian Federation, areas that the Russian Federation has a lot of expertise with. Mm-hmm. So if you're sitting in South Korea and you got Kim Jong-un saying you're the big enemy, and they're building up their nuclear weapons capabilities with the Hwasong-19 that could reach the whole of the United States. So you've got to be concerned. And I think also for Japan, there's no question that Japan is very concerned about their security. Look, we have the extended nuclear deterrence commitments. They want to hear about those commitments.
Meaning from the United
States. They want to be reassured.
From the United States, right? I mean, that's
from the United States.
So is that with both those countries, just staying there for another beat, to what extent is because you raise a question here, America's commitments to almost all of its longtime allies are at least a matter of question right now since the second Trump administration began 3 months ago. To what extent is that playing a role in this nuclear matter?
Oh, I think it's playing a big role. I think the credibility of the United States is one of the key factors that has South Korea, over 70% of the population believe they should have a nuclear weapon, and Japan also, wondering about our commitments. And they just need reassurances. But I'm not sure those reassurances would do it, Tom. Yeah. I think there's a good likelihood that both South Korea and Japan will pursue their own nuclear weapons.
The future of national security is here. Introducing the Cipher Brief's NatSec Edge Conference, June 5th through 6th, 2025 in Austin, Texas. Join leaders from intelligence, defense, private industry, and investment as they explore the innovations shaping tomorrow's world. Gain critical insights, connect with top minds, and shape the future of security in an interconnected world. Don't just witness the future, be a part of it. Secure your spot now at natsekedge.com.
Let's go further to the south then and stay in that part of the world. You mentioned in the piece that you wrote for us last week that down the road, Taiwan, Vietnam, and even Indonesia might have a nuclear weapons program future on their minds. What's in play there? I assume it has to do with China.
Yes, of course. It has to do with China.
Yeah.
And Taiwan in the 1970s was pursuing nuclear weapons.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it was they were in earnest pursuing that capability. And I think now, I mean, look, if you're sitting in Taipei, and it's pretty obvious that, you know, China has overwhelming military capabilities. And then you may be wondering, where would the U.S. be in this equation if indeed there was a military attack?
Right.
Having nuclear weapons, it's a deterrent.
Right.
And I heard that also from the North Koreans, and I hear it from many others. It's a deterrent. One would have to think twice before attacking a country that has nuclear weapons, because that country is going to respond.
Right. Okay. That is a very good segue to you're doing a great job, Ambassador, of taking us around the world in this disturbing new world of nuclear proliferation. And let's go now to the center of Europe, because what you just said about the nuclear deterrent, it's worth a reminder for younger viewers maybe and listeners that 30 years ago or so, Ukraine had something on order of 1,700 nuclear weapons on its soil as part of the Soviet Union, and those, as part of the agreements following the end of the Cold War, were dismantled or taken away. But this brings us to questions not of new arsenals, but we have countries in Europe, and I'm thinking here primarily of Poland. Flatly, publicly, the president of Poland asking for the stationing of nuclear weapons on its soil. What's going on there?
Well, given what Russia is doing in Ukraine with its war of aggression and Putin's threat to use tactical nuclear weapons and beyond, even strategic nuclear weapons, I think Poland has raised its hand and said, "Look, we need some capabilities here, and we want to go back to where we were over 30 years ago, and have, if you will, tactical nuclear weapons, so that indeed, if there is a Russian onslaught, we could respond." And again, it's the element of deterrence.
Right.
If Russia knows Poland has these nuclear, if you will, the tactical nuclear weapons, I mean, logically, aren't they going to think twice about doing something untoward?
Right. And I guess taking that a step further, the Ukraine lesson there would be that perhaps the West and other supporters of Ukraine wouldn't have been so reticent about really robust support if they had known in the nuclear cat and mouse game that Russia would be far less likely to even throw that threat around, right?
No, I agree, Tom. Look, the Budapest Memorandum of 1994. I mean, it's obvious. You just mentioned it. 1,700 nuclear weapons were given to the Russian Federation, in addition to intercontinental ballistic missiles. So, but what did Ukraine get in return? Security assurances from Russia.
Right.
The U.S. and the U.K. were there, but it was Russia that invaded in 2014 in Crimea, etc. So, I heard this many times from the North Koreans. Security assurances are a piece of paper, you could tear it up, or you want us to dismantle our nuclear weapons capabilities. We're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars.
Mm-hmm. Okay, in this tour of the horizon here, let's go a little bit to the east and the south and to the Persian Gulf, right? You also wrote in your piece, and of course it's very much out there, that another U.S. ally, very different one, different circumstances, Saudi Arabia. For a long time, right? They have been looking at Iran and essentially, if I have it right, saying, well, if they're going to go that route and get the bomb, we are too. Is it more complicated than that?
No, I think you hit it on the head. I think this is Iran's. I mean, Iran's nuclear program, or at least according to the intelligence community, they stopped in 2003. They stopped, but they continue to enrich uranium
Hmm.
at the 20% level. And going to 90% purity, it's not too difficult to go from 20 to 90%. Iran continuously has refused to give access to IAE monitors. They continue to enrich uranium. As we speak to them now, Tom, it will be interesting to see how Iran responds to the U.S. demand that they cease and desist with all of their enrichment activities.
Hmm.
My personal view is they've built a significant infrastructure. They're not going to halt it.
Right, right. Well, you took me right to the next question, which is, of course, what can be done about any of this. I find it interesting, that for all the big, robust international treaties that have existed, the NPT, the START treaties with Russia and so forth, one that I don't think people gave much of a chance of going anywhere was this Iran-U.S. Negotiation under the Trump team. It sounds like you don't think it's going very far either, although there has been some daylight, right, between within the Trump administration,
Right.
and some suggestion that Trump's penchant for making some kind of a deal may get somewhere there. I mean, would that not be a kind of positive domino effect in terms of not just the Saudis but the Turks and others who,
There's no question about that. I mean, that would be a very, very strategic move. Many of us, I'm one of them, just don't see Iran going down that path, trying to retain some sort of enrichment capabilities. Because when we go back to the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, countries were permitted, obviously countries are permitted, to retain nuclear capabilities for civilian purposes. And this is where Iran has been over the years. But again, given what they've done prior to 2003, and given what we're hearing from Iran with their proxies, if I was sitting in Tel Aviv or Riyadh, I would be very concerned, or Turkey.
Right, right. So are there, I mean, just to put imagine yourself in any job of where nuclear non-proliferation is in the title or in the job description, right? Which, as I said earlier, you once had. Are there any policy avenues to reverse this trend we're talking about? Or is it the case that because they're so different, the concerns and needs of all these countries and regions have to be addressed if you're going to stop proliferation there?
I think it has to start with, in this case, New START, which expires in February of 2026.
This is the U.S.
If these other countries see the United States and Russia dismantling their nuclear weapons, and that's what we did, and that's what Russia was doing, and now they've stopped doing that. I mean, Russia, we're talking about close to 6,000 nuclear weapons, 1,700 deployed. And we're saying, and Putin is saying, we don't want to come back to New START. We don't want to talk about arms control. That's a thing of the past. We're going to build and we're going to build. So if you're a small country living in this environment, and certainly the U.S. is responding to that because we're upgrading our if you will, nuclear deterrent, because we're just not going to sit here and watch that go on with Russia. So if you're a small country sitting and watching these major countries say that we're not interested in arms control. I mean, to date, China has refused to talk to us about arms control. So what would you do then, Tom? I mean, you've got to think about, I mean, you have assurances from allies and partners, but you've got to think about what de Gaulle thought about in 1962 with John F. Kennedy saying, I appreciate your nuclear umbrella, but we need our own nuclear weapons.
Right, right. And you mentioned China, and we're going to have to leave it in a minute, but we've left for last the country that I believe, tell me if I'm wrong, is proliferating at perhaps a faster rate than anyone right now, right?
Oh, there's no question about that, Tom. There's no question about that. And a very conservative estimates are by 2030, China will have over 1,000 nuclear warheads. That's a very conservative estimate. Right. And the silos they're building in Gansu and Xinjiang, we're talking about, over 120, and this is for ballistic missiles to deliver those nuclear warheads. And there is absolutely no dialogue with China on any form of arms control.
Yeah. Oh, well, I'd love to end on a happy note, but I don't see one. But Ambassador Joseph, it's not your fault. It's great as always to get your insights and have you with us. And thanks again for being with us at the Cipher.
Okay, thanks, Tom.